Hello everybody, Nigel Saunders here. Today we're going to be working on this Scots pine, or Pinus sylvestris is the scientific name, which always makes me think of Tweety Bird and Sylvester. So this tree is getting quite old. I'm trying to think of exactly how old it is. I think it's probably about 15 years since I dug it out of the ground as a small seedling. And when I did dig it out of the ground, it was quite a tall tree, and I cut it off at the first branch, which, if you look at it from this view, you can see the original trunk. And this was the first branch that was absolutely horizontal to this trunk. And I cut it off, and then on pines and spruces, this branch slowly takes over as the leader. So it goes from 90 degrees to the trunk, and as it grows, it moves upright and takes over as the main trunk of the tree. And it quickly catches up in diameter to the bottom part of the tree. It's amazing that they do that. So, I've been growing this tree for the 15 years with the intent on making it a bunging or Literati style. So a Literati style tree, it's a difficult form to achieve successfully. Some of the characteristics you're looking for in a slender trunk tree is a convincing root base to the tree. Even though it's a slender trunk, you still want nice surface roots on the tree, or surface roots that are convincing. If the tree's growing on a cliff, you want, your roots to look miniature or convincing. On the trunk, most Literati style trees are duplicating a really old mountain tree in nature, one that's kind of a lone pine. And you want really nice miniature plates of bark on the trunk. So, the tree has to be fairly old to look old. A young tree you may have the form correct, but it's not until the bark gets old and the tree gets old that it truly looks like an old slender pine tree. The trees don't have to have movement to the trunk. They can be a straight trunk. They can have lots of movement. They can have a little movement. It's up to, what you have to start off with, how you've designed the tree. You can wire a slender trunk into any shape you want when they're young, and they'll stay there. So this tree hasn't been wired yet. And it hasn't really been styled too carefully yet. So that's what we're going to be doing today, is getting this Literati or bunging pine underway. So here's the base of the tree, and we're going to start by weeding and getting all the moss off from the base of the tree. That way we'll get a really good look at the roots and see what's going on. And it may influence which we pick as the front of the tree. So it's always important to do this. I finished cleaning up the base of the tree, picking off any moss, and checking out what's going on with the surface roots, which are looking pretty good. This is the look I'm after for a mountain pine, is these twisted roots. I've been working on these roots. This tree's been repotted several times, and I've slowly been working on the roots, trying to get that real nice twisted look. Normally on my trees, I'll always tell you to get a nice, radial root spread. But on this type of tree, like a mountain pine, it's nice to have sort of a one-sided root system. So, the tree's anchored into the soil or the rock or cliff face on the one side, more so than the other. So it kind of has an anchor point. So this is the root base as it stands. So got a little bit of moss to pick out here. Again, you don't want moss on your trunk. It kind of rots the bark away. Doesn't harm the tree, but you won't get that nice bark at the base of your tree if you have moss on it. It keeps the bark moist and the bark doesn't develop into plates nicely. Yeah, it's just not a good thing. So the next step for this tree is we have to pick a front for it. So let's do that now. So here we go on picking a front. Now, as I showed you before, in this view the trunk goes up straight and then it goes off on an angle. So that doesn't look good because it doesn't flow nicely. It may later on in years to come, that transition may slowly disappear, but for now it's kind of an ugly elbow here in the trunk, so we definitely don't want to use this type of a view. We want the tree coming forward to us. When you're designing a tree, you don't want the tree leaning back away from the viewer. It looks like I don't know, if you imagine a human, you're looking at a human and they're backing away from you, it looks like they don't want to be seen. If the tree's slightly tilting towards the viewer, it invites you to be comfortable looking at the tree. If a human's facing you, it's like it's interested in being looked at. Does that make sense? Maybe it makes sense, I don't know. So we want the tree to tilt slightly towards the viewer when the viewer's looking at the tree. So that kind of leaves us with sort of this type of view because the trunk comes forward. If we go around the other side, we still get a nice trunk line, but the tree's tilting back. It would require a different planting angle, which it is possible. We're going to be repotting this tree in spring into a pot with less patina. This pot has seen, I've used this pot, it's a sort of a training pot, it's a terracotta pot, and I've used it to start many trees in. It always amazes me that it's still sort of in one piece. I put some screening on this side to hold the soil in where the pot's fallen apart, and yeah, I think this might be the last year for the pot. It's kind of, this wall's just fallen apart, and however, it lasted, I've probably had this pot almost 20 years, and it's, for a terracotta pot, that's pretty good. So, looking at the views, I'm liking this sort of direction around about here. It flows nicely. The tree comes towards you. It's got some nice roots for you to look at. So I'm just going to pick the exact front here, and I'm going to mark it. That's my handy dandy twist tie marker. And yeah, I'm liking that view there. So that's probably how we'll style the tree, and when we repot it, we'll put it in the pot at that angle, or that front. Yeah, so there we go. Next we come to the styling of the top of the tree. There's so many choices we could do here. Some Literati trees have the branches hanging almost following the trunk line, like cascading branches. Some have very small foliage pads up top with a little rounded top. There's a lot of possibilities. If you look up, Literati bonsai on the internet, Bonsai, you'll see some of the styling ideas of a this type of style. One thing I want to do with my tree is I don't want the tree to look too fragile. Some trees, mainly like in the Chinese mountains and that, because they don't get the severe snow like they do here in Canada, you get some fairly slender trees bending out over cliffs, and if that was in Canada, the tree would just break off. So I want my tree to be more of a Canadian style or a North American style. So a tree like this, if it was too slanted, the weight of the snow would just break it every winter. So that's why I like it fairly upright. And I also I'm a big fan of the flat top type pine trees. This is a style you'll see in China on their mountain trees. The branches will reach out and they'll have like a very flat top on the pines. And you see this a lot in North America too, is that a lot of the pines, as they kind of reach their maximum height, they can't grow up anymore, so they grow out. And they'll get this big umbrella of foliage on top of the tree. And I'm a big fan of that, and it's just a personal preference. I like a slender trunk with a nice rounded canopy on top, or a flat top type look to the tree. So it's a personal choice. You can wire all these branches drooping down. You can style it any way that you please, but for me, I envision this tree as a flat top type tree. So that's how we're going to proceed today in the styling, is that direction. At the apex of the tree, you'll see the tree is really healthy. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 clusters of buds. And some of the other branches, some of the side branches, we've got 3 in here, 3 on there, 3 here, 1 on this one, couple on this one. So the tree's very healthy. It's a good time to work on the tree. Another indicator that the tree's healthy is that the needles are quite long and lush. Not what we want on this pine tree eventually. We want shorter needles, but right now the tree's just been in a growing stage, so these kind of needles are ideal for growing the tree and keeping it healthy. And now we're going to get into a styling and refining phase for the tree. So the first branch we're going to tackle is that upright apex, or the tallest branch. So we'll zoom in on the base of that. So keeping in mind that this is going to be sort of a flat top tree, we have a branch coming up, and then we have one that shoots vertically. But off to the side we have a little bud here. So I'm thinking we can prune off the vertical part and keep this bud as a new branch or new leader. There's another branch growing in kind of across the tree here that I think we'll remove. It's in at the base of a branch junction, so we don't need that because we're going from 1 to 2 branches here. We definitely don't need that third little branch there. So let's get rid of that little branch for starters. There we go. And then we'll get rid of this old needle here. Oh, it smells nice. Another old needle here. Rid of this needle. Now I can see what's going on better here. So we've got this branch goes into 1, 2, 3, 4 branches. So we're going to cut off the vertical one on top. We don't want that shooting straight up like that. So that's going to go. This pine tree is going to be mainly styled with clip and grow, but we will do some wiring to it. Especially as it gets closer to the final form, we'll be doing more wiring. So there, I've removed the upright branch off there. So we're still left with 1, 2, 3 branches. So we have to decide which ones we want to keep and which ones we want to get rid of. So this branch is kind of crossing the design. It goes in on the design of the tree. So I think we can remove that one. That will be the one we remove. There we go. And then we need to shorten the other one. Now this one's very vigorous. It's got looks like 3 buds there. There's 1, 2, 3. So because this foliage is nice and healthy and green, we can cut off all those buds and we can shorten this branch back to a point anywhere safely within this foliage. This is all last year's foliage. So we can prune it back anywhere along there. So we can do some directional pruning. We've got some needles facing outwards here. So we'll cut it somewhere above there, right about here. There we go. And that shortens that branch. And in spring of this year we'll get a lot of buds in here, and then we'll pick the exact branches we want from that. Now, look at the design. This branch goes straight to here, and it's a very straight branch on that angle, so we probably want to do something about that. So off of this branch we have one branch dividing into two again. This branch continues, and then we're dividing into 2 here again. So we want to keep that division and wire this branch so we don't have this long straight section. So we're going to wire this branch more horizontal, and then wire these sub branches so they're also horizontal. So we'll get out the wire and start doing that. We've got some wire on now, and I'm going to shorten some of these branches. This one has 3 buds at the tip. It can be shortened quite a bit. So we'll take it down to here. And we'll shorten this one. Has 3 buds at the tip. It's very vigorous also. We'll shorten it back to here. And this one we've got 3 buds at the tip. It's not a real long branch. I think we will take those buds off at the tip though. We'll shorten it a little bit. There. And now we'll start bending some of these branches into place. So we'll get this one bent in a more flowing direction. And this one. Just bend our wire around and we'll get that. Like that. That looks pretty good. Yeah, I'll just show you that from above. Yeah, so here's that branch from above. We have our main branch coming off and dividing into 2 again. You can see it kind of flows nicely from the branch. So next we want to start working on this branch here. I'm just looking at it. Okay, I think we have a little upright branch that's growing at the base of these two other larger branches. I'm thinking we don't need it. Yeah, that's got to go. So that'll be our first thing we do, is get rid of that little branch there. There we go. And then I'm looking at the structure here. I think we'll start by shortening these vigorous tips. So we're going to take it back to about here. Well, it's almost in half. And same with this one. There we go. And we'll reduce the tip on this one. And we'll take this one back too. So this is fairly major surgery on the pine, reducing these growing tips back so far. But the tree is really healthy, so it should recover no problems. You wouldn't want to try this on a weak tree if it's not growing really vigorously. And in fact, it's best to let the tree grow wild for a year before you do this reduction, so it gains a lot of strength and vigor. So in spring it can put out new buds and form new branches. So the next step is going to be to wire these branches in place. So let's get them wired up and we'll start positioning them. Okay, so I've got this branch wired up, and I kept it fairly upright so it doesn't compete with this branch. And this branch is fine the way it is. It doesn't need wiring. So we're just going to leave that alone. The last branch we have to decide on, there's a branch here which, if we imagine, this coming up, these could be our two branches that are dividing here. So it's not a bad placement, and it would create some depth in this direction. So for now, I'm just going to leave that branch alone and we'll develop it. The key to developing this tree in the future will be to keep the growth very small and compact. So we can do that, several ways. We'll keep pruning our candles nice and short, and we'll put the tree in a smaller pot so it has less vigor, so the inner nodes between needles will stay tight and compact. So, repotting it into a nice pot in spring will be one of the key features of keeping this tree miniature. So that's all the work we'll be doing to our Scots pine today. I'll put it back in the cold basement until spring when we repot it into a nice bonsai pot. So thanks for watching. Nigel Saunders. We'll see you next time.